Move. You're blocking the entire hallway. Victoria Harlow didn't slow her stride. She walked straight into Loretta's cart, deliberately shoulder first, and sent 3 stacks of folded towels tumbling across the floor. Loretta bent down to gather them. Victoria looked at her the way people look at something they've stepped in. Then she snatched one towel off the floor and threw it hard directly into the old woman's face. You call this folded? Do it again. She stepped closer, lowered her voice to something that felt worse than a shout. Honestly, I don't know why they keep letting your kind clean up here. You're slow, you're useless, and you're an eyesore in a 5-star hotel. Loretta picked the towel off her lap, began refolding. Victoria wasn't done. Look at her. She turned to the guest watching nearby, a young woman with her phone already raised. 70 years old and still on her knees scrubbing floors, worthless trash every single day, and we still keep paying her. Loretta did not look up. She folded the towel. She set it on the cart. She moved to the next one. What nobody in that hallway knew, not Victoria, not the woman filming, not a single person on that floor, was that the old black grandmother they had just called worthless trash was the reason that building existed at all. And in 3 days, one man was going to walk out of an elevator, look straight at her, and say 2 words that would bring Victoria Harlow's entire world to the ground. Hey, Mom, stay right here, because this story is one you will not forget. Drop your location and local time in the comments right now. And if you haven't subscribed yet, don't wait. This is exactly the kind of story we tell on this channel. The Meridian Grand Hotel rose 28 floors above North Michigan Avenue in downtown Chicago, a column of glass and polished limestone that caught the cold morning light off Lake Michigan and threw it back over the magnificent mile in long, clean lines. The lobby floor was Italian marble white, with gray veining sealed to a mirror finish and cold underfoot regardless of season. The front desk was a single unbroken slab of black walnut 12 feet across, positioned beneath a ceiling installation of 2,000 hand-blown glass spheres, suspended at staggered heights, each one casting a small, warm circle of downward light onto the floor below. The floral arrangements were rotated every Monday and Thursday and cost $400 per change. Room rates started at $480 a night. Penthouse suites ran $4,200. The Meridian Grand was the flagship property of Gibson Luxury Hotels, a privately held company with 47 locations across 22 states, $900 million in total assets, and a founder whose name was printed on every keycard sleeve, every welcome letter. Every in-room menu slipped beneath every door in every room in the building. Daniel Gibson. Most of the 260 employees who worked at the Meridian Grand had never seen his face outside of a photograph. Most had never needed to. They did their jobs, took their paychecks, and went home. The name at the bottom was just a name. What almost none of them knew was that Daniel Gibson's mother mopped their hallways every single morning. Her name was Loretta Mae Gibson, 71 years old, 5 feet 2 inches tall, built close to the ground in the particular way of people who have spent their lives in sustained physical work. Her hair was gray and kept neat beneath a white hairnet. Her hands had curved gradually over the decades so slowly she had not felt it happening degree by degree, year after year, until one afternoon she set her palm flat on a countertop and found she could not fully straighten her fingers anymore. The joints at the base of each one had thickened with age and use until they sat permanently raised beneath the skin. On her worst mornings, she wore thin cotton gloves. She never mentioned them to anyone. She arrived at the Meridian Grand's service entrance every morning at 6:15, swiped her badge at the side door, and rode the freight elevator to the second-floor supply room, where her cart was always waiting, stocked and arranged exactly as she had left it the afternoon before. 4 floors per shift, the same order every day. She moved through each room with the quiet economy of someone who has been doing the same task for so long that thought is no longer required, only attention. Nobody on the housekeeping staff knew her last name. To most of them, she was Mrs. L, or the quiet one at the far end of the hall. She did not gossip during shift changes or linger in the break room after lunch. She brought her food in a small blue insulated cooler every day, a ham sandwich, an apple, and a thermos of sweet tea, and ate it alone in the service stairwell between the 10th and 11th floors at 12:30, sitting on the 3rd step up from the landing back straight, reading whatever paperback she had borrowed from the Chicago Public Library on State Street. She had worked at the Meridian Grand for 7 years. In all that time, she had told no one on that floor who she was. The truth of who she was had started in Memphis, Tennessee, in the spring of 1981. Loretta was 29. Daniel was 2. His father had been gone 6 months. She had just taken a second job cleaning rooms at the Airport Comfort Inn off Interstate 240 to cover the gap. She stayed in hotel housekeeping for 35 years after that, through 6 properties, 3 employers, 2 knee surgeries, and the slow accumulation of damage to her hands that had settled into permanence so gradually she had stopped grieving it. What those 35 years left her besides the bend in her fingers was a single line she kept every month in a small spiral ledger written in blue ballpoint beneath her other expenses D college fund, $200. She never missed a month, or missed. Not when the boiler broke in February of 1993, not when her mother's funeral in 1999 emptied every other account she had. $200 every single month, 18 years. That money put Daniel Gibson through the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, then through Wharton, then into the career that ended or really began with the opening of the first Gibson Luxury Hotels property in Atlanta in 2009. 14 years later, 47 properties, $900 million in assets. When Daniel sat across from his mother at her kitchen table in Bronzeville and told her she never had to work another day in her life, that he would give her anything she asked for, Loretta looked at him for a long moment and then said quietly, "I want to work in one of your hotels, baby. I want to see what you built with my hands." Daniel said yes, but under one condition. No one could know who she was, because he needed to see, not through quarterly reports or guest surveys, but through the only method he trusted, how the people he employed treated the most invisible person in the building when they believed no one important was watching. Loretta agreed without hesitation. She had been on her feet her entire life. A few more years would not break her. Only 3 people inside the Meridian Grand knew the truth. Henry Brooks, 66, head of building security, and a retired Army staff sergeant, who gave Loretta a precise, quiet salute every morning at the service door, and never asked a single question. Monique Davis, 52, fellow housekeeper, and Loretta's closest friend in the building, who kept the secret out of love and nothing else. And Patricia Webb Daniels, executive assistant of 11 years, who maintained Loretta's HR records from the 18th floor and ensured that nothing unusual ever appeared in her file. Victoria Harlow knew none of it. Victoria, 34, Harvard MBA, general manager for 2 years, the youngest GM in Gibson Hotels history, had decided what Loretta May Gibson was. Old, slow, a liability she had not yet found the right moment to remove. That Tuesday morning, a guest named Kendall Price checked into suite 1408 on the 14th floor. Loretta's cart was already heading toward that hallway. Neither of them had any idea what the next 3 days would cost. Loretta was halfway through Suite 1408 when the door opened. She had started with the bathroom the way she always did, scrubbing the grout lines around the base of the soaking tub, rehanging the towels in precise thirds, replacing the used toiletry bottles with fresh ones lined in a straight row on the marble shelf with their labels facing forward. She worked without hurrying, without wasted motion, the way her body had learned to work across 4 decades of rooms exactly like this one. When the bathroom was done, she stripped the bed in a single pull, bundled the linens into the cart bag, and began laying down the fresh sheets. She was pressing the second corner of the fitted sheet under the mattress, a movement her arthritic fingers had to negotiate carefully, pressing against the resistance, making the fold hold when she heard the keycard beep twice and the door swung open. Kendall Price stepped inside and stopped. She was 31, dressed in an ivory blazer over fitted joggers, carrying a coffee from a cafe in Wicker Park, and her phone already open in one hand. She had 2.3 million followers on TikTok, a monthly brand deal income that exceeded what Loretta had earned in her first 5 years in Memphis, and a particular quality of ease about her place in the world, the kind that comes not from cruelty exactly, but from a lifetime of never once being inconvenienced without recourse. She had asked the front desk upon check-in when housekeeping would be finished. She had been told 10 o'clock. It was 10:14. "Excuse me." Her voice was flat and perfectly level, the voice of someone who has never needed volume to be taken seriously. "I said I'd be back at 10. Loretta straightened. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I'm nearly finished. Just the nightstand and I'll be out of your way." Kendall did not move from the doorway. She looked at Loretta the way people look at a slow-loading screen, not with anger exactly, but with the particular impatience of someone who finds delay personally offensive. Then, in one unhurried motion, she raised her phone and opened the camera. She did not announce she was recording. She simply pointed it at Loretta and let it run. "This is the Meridian Grand," she said softly in the intimate, confiding voice she used for her most watched content. $480 a night, and housekeeping is still in my room at 10:14. She panned the lens toward Loretta. "Look at this. I mean, look." Loretta finished the far nightstand, straightened the lamp, repositioned the notepad and pen at their correct angle, and moved to gather her cart. "I'm sorry." Kendall's voice lifted slightly. "Can she not hear me? Am I invisible right now?" "I hear you, ma'am," Loretta said without stopping. "Almost done." Kendall crossed the room, picked up the perfume bottle she had left on the dresser, and without changing her expression, tipped it steadily over the freshly made bed. The liquid spread in a slow, dark oval across the white duvet and began soaking through. "Oops," she said to the camera. "Looks like you'll have to do that again?" For 3 full seconds, Loretta stood completely still. She looked at the spreading stain. She looked at Kendall Price, standing behind it with her phone raised and her chin slightly lifted. Something moved through Loretta in that stillness, not rage and not resignation either, but recognition. She had stood in this exact moment in rooms very much like this one, across 35 years of work in cities, up and down this country. She had stood here when she was 32. She had stood here when she was 45. She had stood here at 60, with worse knees and worse hands than she had now, and she had done the same thing she did now. She reached into her cart, took out a clean duvet cover, and began again. Victoria Harlow arrived 4 minutes later. A junior associate at the front desk had seen Kendall walk back through the lobby with an expression that preceded complaints, and called upstairs immediately because that was what the culture of the Meridian Grand under Victoria's management had trained every front-facing employee to do. Victoria walked in, read the room in a single sweep, and turned to Kendall with a smile that was warm and instant and cost her nothing. "Ms. Price, I'm Victoria Harlow, the general manager. I am so sorry about this." She did not look at Loretta when she said it. "The room wasn't ready," Kendall said, "and now there's a stain on the bed. Completely unacceptable. I will make this right." Victoria turned then, and her voice changed, not loud, not cruel, but dry and precise, the tone of someone ending a minor transaction. "Strip everything. Fresh linens on the whole bed. Redo the bathroom. All of it. From the beginning." Loretta looked at this bathroom she had spent 22 minutes cleaning. She looked at the bed she had already made twice. She looked at Kendall Price, who had the phone aimed directly at her face with no apology and no hesitation. "Yes, ma'am," Loretta said. Victoria watched for 3 minutes to confirm the work had begun, then left. As the cart shifted slightly in the doorway, a small photograph slipped from the side pocket and dropped face up onto the carpet, a young black woman and a small boy, maybe 6 years old, both squinting into bright summer sunlight outside an apartment building somewhere in the south. The woman was laughing. The boy had hold of her hand. Kendall glanced at it, picked it up, set it back on the cart without looking at it again. She settled into the armchair near the window and crossed her legs and kept the camera running as Loretta remade the bed for the 3rd time. Slowly, carefully, her bent hands pressing each corner into place. The video went live at 11:47 that morning. "Chicago luxury hotel can't get housekeeping done by noon. This is what $480 per night looks like." By noon, 18,000 people had watched. The number was still climbing. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, the TikTok had 47,000 views. By 5, it had crossed 90,000. The comments had sorted themselves into patterns. A smaller faction was embarrassed by Kendall Price. A much larger one had decided that Loretta was the problem. Why is a 70-year-old still doing physical labor / the hotel is a liability waiting to happen / she should have retired years ago / fire her before she falls and breaks something on their property / this is actually really sad. Not the guest, the fact that she clearly can't keep up anymore. By the time Loretta walked out through the service entrance at 3:30 and stood for a moment in the cold air of North Michigan Avenue, eyes on the concrete, the video had been shared more than 500 times. The Meridian Grand had been tagged in over 1,400 comments. A lifestyle blog had embedded it in a piece titled, "When Luxury Forgets What Service Actually Means." A Chicago-based news aggregator had screenshotted the comment section. Victoria Harlow had seen the numbers at 2 o'clock. She had closed her office door. She had been very still at her desk for a long time. She called Loretta in the following morning at 8:50. The office was on the 3rd floor, glass-fronted, narrow, meticulously arranged to signal control. A motivational print on the wall read, "Excellence is not an accident," in white sans serif against dark gray. A framed award from the Illinois Hotel and Lodging Association sat on the credenza. Victoria was already seated at her glass desk when Loretta appeared in the doorway. A folder sat open between them. Victoria did not offer Loretta a seat. Loretta sat down anyway. "I'll be direct," Victoria said. "What happened in Suite 1408 reflects a pattern of concerns that have been accumulating for some time. You were behind schedule. A guest was inconvenienced. The incident generated significant negative media attention for this property." She placed both palms flat on the desk. "I am issuing a formal written warning today. It goes into your HR file. If further performance issues arise in the next 30 days, the next step is a performance improvement plan. Failure to meet those requirements means termination." Loretta sat with her hands folded in her lap and looked at Victoria with an evenness that Victoria clearly had not anticipated. I was 14 minutes behind because the room required additional time following a spill. The spill was not caused by me. I understand you have a perspective on that, Victoria said in the tone of a door being quietly closed. The warning stands. Loretta accepted her copy, folded it precisely along the center crease, and placed it in the front pocket of her uniform. She stood. Is there anything else, ma'am? Victoria looked at her for a moment. That's all. Loretta walked out. Down the hall in the employee break room, Chad Prescott was playing the TikTok on his phone for the third time that morning, flat on the table so 4 other staff members could see. He had saved it to his personal favorites the previous evening. She just stands there, said the man from banquets, leaning forward, while the woman pours perfume on the bed. Doesn't say a word. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Chad shook his head slowly, enjoying himself. Not once, just redid the whole thing. A housekeeper named Tasha set down her coffee without responding. She looked at the phone screen for a long moment, something unreadable moving across her face. Then she picked up her cart key, pushed back her chair, and walked out of the break room. Chad did not notice. What Chad did not know. What Victoria had gone to careful lengths never to connect in any written record was that this was not the first time a woman on the housekeeping staff of the Meridian Grand had ended up in front of a formal warning before the door. In the past 18 months, 5 members of the housekeeping team had left the hotel. All 5 were over the age of 60. All 5 had clean performance reviews stretching back years. Claudette Williams, 64, had worked at the Meridian Grand for 11 years before a cluster of guest complaints appeared in her HR file inside a single 30-day window, complaints she later told a labor attorney she had never once heard about during her actual employment. Ruth Simmons, 67. Margaret Cole, 61. Diane Torres, 63. Alice Park, 62. One by one, across 18 months, they had been documented, warned, placed on improvement plans, and quietly walked out the service entrance for the last time, each of them believing it had been their own failing. Every single termination had been approved by Victoria Harlow. Every file had been copied quietly and without authorization by Henry Brooks. He had begun this practice 8 months ago, slowly saying nothing to anyone, logging each case, the way a careful man logs things he suspects he may one day need to produce. He kept the copies on a USB drive in the inside pocket of his uniform jacket, the same pocket where he carried the photograph of his old army unit from his second tour in Iraq. He understood something about documentation that Victoria, for all her Harvard education, had apparently never considered evidence needs to exist before it can be used. It cannot be assembled after the fact. That afternoon, Henry pulled up the security footage from the 14th floor and watched all of it Suite 1408, every camera angle, beginning to end. Then he checked the 3rd floor corridor footage from earlier that morning, watched Loretta walk into Victoria's office and walk back out 17 minutes later with a folded paper in her front pocket, and sat with that for a long moment. He took out his phone. He opened a new note and typed 4 words, enough. It ends soon. He did not send it to anyone. He locked the screen, slid the phone back into his pocket, and returned to the monitors. On the 3rd floor, Victoria Harlow opened a blank performance folder. She wrote a name at the top of the first page in blue ink, Loretta May Gibson, and pressed the pen down slightly harder than necessary as she drew a single line beneath it. She had been waiting for an excuse for months. The TikTok had just handed her one. Victoria Harlow placed the performance improvement plan on Loretta's cart on Wednesday morning at 9:17, while Loretta was restocking the supply shelf at the end of the 14th floor corridor. She didn't call her into the office this time. She walked out to the hallway, waited for Loretta to turn around, and held the document out with the particular efficiency of someone filing a form rather than addressing a person. 30-day PIP effective today. The specific metrics are outlined on page 2. I need your signature at the bottom acknowledging receipt. Loretta read the entire document before she signed it. Victoria stood and waited. Her expression did not change. Loretta signed. She handed it back. She returned to her cart and continued down the hall. Victoria walked back toward the elevator with the signed copy and a small sense of satisfaction she did not bother to conceal from herself. The termination meeting was already blocked on the third-floor conference room calendar for Friday at 2 o'clock. She had asked HR to pull the exit paperwork template that morning. The PIP was not meant to give Loretta 30 days to improve. It was meant to create the paper trail that justified ending things cleanly on Friday. The tick-tock, the written warning the PIP served on the same week that was more than enough. 2 days was sufficient. What Victoria Harlow did not know, what she had not known for 14 months, was that her own financial records had been under active review by an outside auditing firm retained directly by the Gibson Hotel's board. The arrangement had been clean in its design. 3 vendors, Crestline Linen Services Pacific Supply Group and Metro Build Maintenance. All legitimate companies. All providing real services to the Meridian Grand. All billing the hotel at rates running between 22 and 31% above their actual contracted amounts. The overcharges had started modestly $8,000 here, $11,000 there, spread across quarterly invoices in amounts small enough to fall beneath standard review thresholds. Over 14 months they had accumulated to $1,400,000. The excess had been routed through each vendor's accounts and redirected through a chain of transactions that ended in 2 personal accounts registered to a Delaware LLC listing Victoria Harlow's home address. The auditors had traced the full chain 6 weeks ago. They had brought their findings to Patricia Webb. Patricia had brought them to Daniel Gibson on a Thursday afternoon in a black folder with no label on the cover. Daniel had read every page without a word. When he set the folder down, he looked out the window at the skyline for a long time. Then he said, "Get me the board, and call Eleanor in New York." On the 18th floor of the Meridian Grand in a corner office, no employee below that level knew existed. Daniel Gibson's desk held 2 things that mattered more than anything else in the room. The first was the black audit folder, now thick with wire transfer records, vendor LLC filings, bank statements, and a 26-page summary prepared by the outside firm. The second was a photograph in a small wooden frame, set at the left corner of the desk, positioned so it was the first thing he saw each morning. A woman in a gray uniform, maybe 30 years old, standing in front of a motel in Memphis in the afternoon sun. She was smiling with her whole face, the kind of smile that doesn't know it's being photographed. On the back of the frame, in Daniel's handwriting in pencil, she made it possible. That Wednesday afternoon, Patricia came into the office and set a second folder beside the first, thinner, quieter. "Victoria served the PIP this morning," Henry confirmed. Loretta signed it and went back to work. She paused. "Henry also says she completed all 4 floors on time." Daniel looked at both folders without touching either of them. "Book the boardroom for Friday at 2. Confirm Eleanor's flight. And notify the IRS contact the meeting is on." "Already done." Patricia moved to leave, then stopped at the door. She set a third document on the desk, a printed list of 5 names each with hire dates, termination dates, and the notation P. Initiated. Victoria Harlow approved. Daniel looked at the list. He had seen it before. This time he looked at it differently, the way a person looks at something when they have finally decided what they are going to do about it. Make sure the board has these files before Friday, he said. Patricia nodded and left. That Wednesday evening, Loretta sat at her kitchen table in the Bronzeville neighborhood of Chicago and called Monique Davis. The call lasted 22 minutes. For most of it, Loretta was quiet, and Monique talked careful and steady, the voice of someone trying to hold something together with their hands. Just say it, Loretta. You don't have to do this. Just tell them who you are. Loretta listened. She looked at the PIP document on the table in front of her, which she had folded and unfolded twice already. Then she looked at the wall above the refrigerator, where a photograph had hung for 6 years, Daniel Gibson in a tuxedo, on the opening night of the Meridian Grand, standing in the lobby in front of the black walnut desk, smiling at the camera with everything in his face. 5 women, Monique, Loretta said. 5 women he doesn't even know about yet. I need him to see what this place looks like before it gets fixed, not after. Monique was quiet for a moment. Then softly, Loretta, baby, you are something else. Loretta folded the PIP one final time and set it on the edge of the table. Friday, she said. It'll be over Friday. She hung up, left the document where it was, and went to bed at 9:15, because she had a 6:15 start, and she had not been late in 7 years, and she was not going to start now. On Thursday morning, Victoria Harlow added 2 floors to Loretta's assignment. She did it through the standard scheduling system, adjusting the route assignments at 6:05, 10 minutes before Loretta arrived, and pulled up her route on the housekeeping tablet. 6 floors instead of 4 with no note in the system. The PIP required demonstrated effort to meet performance standards, and more rooms would make failure easier to document. If Loretta fell behind, and with 6 floors, she likely would. That was 2 more entries for the termination file by Friday afternoon. Loretta looked at the updated route on the screen for a long moment. Then she started pushing. By 11:30, her right hand had opened. It happened against the tile on the 9th floor. She was working a grout line near the base of the soaking tub, and her knuckle caught the edge of the tile at the wrong angle. The skin already thin and dry from the cold, and from 40 years of this same work, and it split without much drama. She pressed a folded paper towel against it, held it for 2 minutes, watched it slow, changed the paper towel, and went back to the tub. She did not go to the nurse's station. She put on a fresh glove and continued. She ate lunch 20 minutes late in the stairwell, as always, and she ate it quickly, which she never did because she had 6 floors and 3 rooms remaining, and the afternoon was not long. At 2:15, rounding a corner on the 14th floor, she nearly walked into Kendall Price. Kendall was checking out the following morning. She had come back from her brand event in the early afternoon and was moving through the corridor toward her suite, coffee in one hand, phone already open in the other. She stopped when she saw Loretta. A slow, specific smile moved across her face, the expression of someone encountering an unexpected piece of good content. "Oh," Kendall said. "You're still here." Loretta kept the cart moving. "Good afternoon, ma'am." Kendall turned and began walking alongside the cart, matching Loretta's pace phone raised. "Guys, she's still here. Day 2. I genuinely thought they would have let her go by now." She angled the lens toward Loretta's hands on the cart handle. Both of them gloved the right one slightly thicker, where the paper towel was still folded beneath the cotton. "Look at her hands. Look at that. She can barely grip the handle." Loretta pushed the cart. "Does it hurt?" Kendall said to the phone, not to Loretta. "Like just watching her, it kind of hurts. Someone's grandmother still doing this. Still on her feet." She tilted the camera toward Loretta's face. "How old are you, sweetheart? 70, 75? Loretta turned the cart toward the service corridor door without answering, and let it close behind her. The second video went live at 3:07. Day 2 update. Still there. Still going. Bless her heart. The Meridian Grand really said age is just a number, LOL. #Chicago, #luxury hotels, #Meridian Grand. By 7 that evening, it had 67,000 views. The tone of the comment section had shifted slightly. More people were naming Kendall's behavior directly this time. More questions about the hotel's treatment of older workers, but the center of mass was the same. People were still discussing Loretta as a situation rather than a person. Victoria posted on LinkedIn at 4:15. Maintaining service excellence requires difficult decisions. Proud of my team for holding the line on our standards every single day. #hospitality, #leadership, #Meridian Grand. No mention of Loretta, no mention of the videos. The post received 41 likes from other hotel managers, all congratulatory. In the third-floor break room, Chad read both captions aloud at shift change to an audience of 4. He added commentary between sentences. He was enjoying himself. In the corner of the room, a young woman named Zara, 4 weeks into her first hotel job, hired on a seasonal contract from a hospitality program at DePaul, sat with her coffee and looked at her phone screen with an expression that Chad, had he been paying attention, would not have known how to read. Zara had watched her grandmother work double shifts at a nursing home in Gary, Indiana, for 31 years. She had picked her up from those shifts sometimes as a teenager and watched her get into the car, moving carefully the way people move when they are very tired and also in pain. She did not find any of this funny. She left the break room before Chad finished talking. In the security office on the ground floor, Henry Brooks had been checking the monitors in intervals throughout the day, not continuously, but the way a person checks on someone they are quietly worried about. He had seen the corner of the corridor where Loretta crossed paths with Kendall Price. He had not had audio, but he hadn't needed it. He knew what the angle of her back meant, and the deliberate straightness of it, and the specific way she had kept moving without stopping or turning around. He saved the footage to the drive. Then he pulled out his phone and sent one text message to a number he had been given 3 months ago and told to use only when something required immediate attention. The message was 4 words: tomorrow. She's ready. Confirmed. He received 1 word back 11 seconds later. Good. That Thursday night, Loretta sat at her kitchen table and did not touch the PIP document. She had read it enough. She looked at the photograph on the wall instead. Daniel at the opening night, that tuxedo, that wide-open smile, the lobby behind him, that had cost so much and taken so long and started with $200 a month in a penciled ledger in a 2-bedroom apartment in South Memphis. "Almost done, baby," she said to the photograph. She turned off the kitchen light. She went to bed. Loretta arrived at the service entrance at 6:10 Friday morning, 5 minutes early, which was not usual, but she had woken at 4:40 and found that sleep was finished for the night. Henry Brooks was completing the last section of his overnight log when she came through the door. He looked up through the security room window and stood immediately. He was in the hallway by the time she reached the service elevator. "Morning, Mrs. Gibson?" Loretta stopped. She looked at him. In 7 years of every morning at this same door, this same corridor, this same man, he had always called her Mrs. L at work, the way everyone else did, even though he had always known better. Tonight, he had said her real name. Not loudly, just cleanly in the empty service corridor with nobody else present. "Morning, Henry." They stood for a moment. Henry was a large, deliberate man who had learned in 2 deployments that the things worth saying were usually the things that took the fewest words. He reached into the inside pocket of his uniform jacket and produced the USB drive, the one he had been building for 8 months, entry by entry, saying nothing to anyone except the one person who needed to know. He held it out. "Everything's on there," he said. "All 5 termination files. The footage from Tuesday, Wednesday, and yesterday afternoon on the 14th floor. Mr. Gibson has copies, but I wanted you to know I made my own." Loretta looked at the drive in his palm. She didn't take it. It wasn't hers to take. But she placed her hand over his briefly, the way a person steadies someone who is holding something heavy, and kept it there for a moment. "Thank you, son," she said. Henry's jaw tightened. He looked away. When he looked back, his eyes were clear, and he nodded once quickly. He held the elevator door open. Loretta pushed her cart inside. The doors closed. She did her full rounds. Lobby first, as always, polishing the marble near the entrance where it caught the most foot traffic, emptying the brass-trimmed waste bins by the revolving doors, wiping the lobby glass until it held no trace of the previous day. She worked the ground floor for 38 minutes, precise and unhurried, the way she had worked it every morning for 7 years. People passed through without slowing. A man with a rolling suitcase and a phone to his ear. 2 guests in running gear heading into the cold of North Michigan Avenue. A night shift desk associate handing off the morning log. Nobody paused. Nobody looked at her with anything beyond the specific inattention that is the particular inheritance of people who clean the places where other people live. By 9, she was on the 11th floor. By 11, she had completed 4 of her 6 assigned rooms. Her hands ached the way they always ached by mid-morning, the familiar deep pressure in the joints that no amount of ibuprofen fully resolved. She changed her gloves at the supply station, took 2 tablets from the small container at the bottom of her cooler, and kept going. On the 18th floor in the corner office, with the east-facing windows and the small wooden frame on the left corner of the desk, Daniel Gibson had arrived at 7:40 through the private stairwell entrance. He came as he always did on these visits, no announcement, no driver carrying his own bag. He took the stairs. Patricia Webb was at her desk when he reached the landing. She stood. "The board chair landed 40 minutes ago. She's at the Lowe's across the street. I'll bring her over at 1:30. She handed him the consolidated folder. "Outside auditors have been here since 8 in the small conference room. Legal arrived at 7:30. The 2 IRS agents came through the loading dock at 6:50. Henry cleared them in personally and walked them to the back anteroom off the boardroom." A pause. "Victoria sent the final termination paperwork to HR at 8:50 this morning. Signed and dated for 2 o'clock today." "Does she know I'm in the building?" "No, sir." "Good." He took the folder and went into his office. He did not sit down immediately. He stood in front of his desk and looked at the photograph in the small wooden frame, his mother in Memphis, young and tired and smiling in the afternoon sun outside the airport Comfort Inn, her hands already beginning to show at the sides what 40 more years of this work would complete. He looked at the gray uniform. He looked at her hands. He sat down. He opened the audit folder and read through it once more, even though he could have recited most of it from memory by now. When he finished, he set it aside, took a single sheet of paper from the drawer, and wrote 4 lines in longhand. He folded the paper twice, placed it in his inside jacket pocket, and did not tell Patricia what it said. At 1:30, Eleanor Marsh arrived from across the street. 61 years old board chair, a woman who had sat across from Daniel Gibson through 14 years of board meetings, and had never once needed to raise her voice to be understood. She greeted the auditors, reviewed the final document summary, and settled into her chair at the head of the boardroom table with her hands folded and her expression entirely composed. By 1:55, every person who needed to be in the room was in the room. The IRS agents sat quietly in the far corner. The auditors had their laptops open. Legal had their folders arranged in identical stacks. Eleanor sat at the head of the table and waited. Daniel stood at the window for a moment and looked at the Chicago skyline, the lake beyond it, flat and gray in the winter light, going all the way to the horizon. Then he put on his jacket. He straightened his collar. He walked to the boardroom door. 2 floors below, Victoria Harlow picked up her termination folder, smoothed the front of her blazer, and said to Chad, Let's go end this. The boardroom on the 18th floor had a mahogany table that seated 14 walls paneled in dark walnut that absorbed sound the way expensive rooms are built to do, and one full wall displaying a chronological row of framed magazine covers, Forbes Black Enterprise Crane's Chicago Business Hospitality Design, a documented record of the same man across 3 decades at 29, at 36, at 43, in front of different buildings in different cities, always with the same expression on his face, present, certain, already thinking about what came next. Nobody who was about to walk through that door had ever stood on this floor before. At 2 o'clock precisely, Victoria Harlow pushed the door open and walked in. She stopped after 2 steps. The room was occupied in a way she had not prepared herself for. Eleanor Marsh at the head of the table. Hands folded expression composed in the particular way of someone who has been fully informed and is waiting patiently for others to arrive at the same place. 2 men with open laptops she did not recognize. A woman in a dark suit she placed, after a moment, as outside general counsel from the firm Gibson Hotels used for corporate matters. 3 others she did not know, 2 of them in plain dark jackets positioned in the far corner, sitting with the specific practiced stillness of people who are accustomed to being in rooms, while other people arrive at realizations. Chad Prescott stepped in behind Victoria and stopped 1 step inside the door. At the far end of the table facing them sat a black man in his late 40s in a charcoal suit, white shirt, dark blue tie, hands folded on the table in front of him. He was looking at an open folder. He had not looked up when the door opened. Victoria's eyes moved to the wall of magazine covers. She looked at the man at 29 in front of a new building in Atlanta, holding a ribbon. The man at 37 on the cover of Black Enterprise, named one of the top entrepreneurs in hospitality. The man at 44 in the Crane's Chicago Business feature. She had actually read the one about the founding of the Meridian Grand, the one that included a quote she had once used in her own GM application. She had looked at that photograph dozens of times without it meaning anything beyond its context on a wall. She looked at the man at the end of the table. The floor moved beneath her in a way that had nothing to do with the building. Before she could form a single word, the door opened again. Loretta Mae Gibson walked in. She was still in her gray housekeeping uniform. Hairnet in place. She had been finishing her last assigned room on the 11th floor when Henry Brooks appeared at the suite doorway and said quietly, without preamble, "It's time, Mrs. Gibson." She had taken off her gloves, folded them into the cart pocket, and followed him to the service elevator without asking anything. 7 years had given her the ability to recognize a moment when it arrived. Daniel Gibson pushed back his chair and stood. He crossed the length of the room in 8 steps. He stopped in front of his mother and looked at her face, her uniform, her hands at her sides. Then he reached out and took both of her hands in his, and held them with the careful, unhurried tenderness of a man handling something he has known the value of for a very long time. He looked at her bent fingers, the joints thickened and raised by 4 decades of work, the permanent shape that 40 years of corridors and linen carts and grout lines and other people's messes had made degree by degree across the full length of his adult life. He held her hands, and he looked at them, and he did not look away. Then he looked up at her face. "Hey, Mom," he said. The boardroom was completely silent. Victoria Harlow's hand found the back of the nearest chair. Her fingers closed around it. Her knuckles went pale. Eleanor Marsh stood. She had never in her career needed volume to carry authority, and she did not need it now. "Allow me to introduce, for those of you who have not had the occasion, Mr. Daniel Gibson, founder, CEO, and sole owner of Gibson Luxury Hotels, the man whose signature appears at the bottom of every paycheck each of you has received for the entire duration of your employment at this company." She let that settle fully before she added the final part. "And this is his mother." Chad Prescott made a sound with no shape. He put one hand flat against the wall beside him. Daniel turned back to face the room, still standing beside Loretta, and spoke without notes. "My mother spent 35 years as a hotel housekeeper. She started in Memphis, Tennessee when I was 2 years old, and she did not stop until the year I opened my first property. She saved $200 a month for 18 straight years without missing a single one to put me through school. Not once." He lifted Loretta's hands gently and held them so that the room could see them. The bend of the fingers, the raised joints, the particular permanent shape of a life's work. "These hands built every hotel in this company before I laid a single foundation. When I opened the Meridian Grand, she asked to work here. She wanted to see what we had built together. And I asked her to let me see, without announcement, without protection, how the people I trusted to lead this building would treat the most invisible person on its staff when they believed nothing and no one was watching them." He lowered her hands. He looked down the full length of the table. "Now I know." Victoria's folder dropped from her fingers. It caught the table's edge and fell open, pages fanning across the carpet, the termination letter with Loretta's name printed at the top, the PIP, the written warning, all of it face up on the dark floor. Nobody moved toward any of it. Loretta looked down at the scattered pages. She looked up at her son. And then, for the first time in 5 days, for the first time since Tuesday morning in that lobby corridor, she smiled. Not the quiet, contained expression she had worn all week. Her real one. Wide and warm, beginning in her eyes, several seconds before it reached her mouth. In the far corner, both ARS agents rose to their feet. The two agents moved around the end of the table with the unhurried, precise pace of people who have done this before and understand that deliberate is more effective than fast. They stopped behind Victoria Harlow's chair. "Ms. Harlow," the senior agent said. "Special Agent Torres, IRS Criminal Investigation. Please take a seat." Victoria was looking at the papers on the floor. She seemed to be processing several things simultaneously, and none of them were organizing themselves into anything useful. "Ms. Harlow," the agent's voice did not change. "Sit down, please." She sat. Daniel reached across the table and turned the audit folder toward her with one hand, the way a person presents something that has already been decided. Inside wire transfer records printed in columns, vendor invoices with inflated figures, circled in red ink. LLC registration documents from a Delaware filing office. 14 months of bank statements with highlighted transaction lines, 47 pages. The work of a 6-week investigation by people paid specifically to follow money and who had not needed long. "Crestline Linen Services," Daniel said. His voice was level. "Pacific Supply Group, Metrobuild Maintenance." He did not raise it. $1,400,000 routed through 3 vendor accounts over 14 months, redirected to 2 personal accounts registered to a Delaware LLC at your home address. Victoria's mouth opened. It closed. "The LLC was incorporated 11 days after you were named general manager of this property," Daniel said. "The first fraudulent invoice was submitted in your 3rd month on the job." Chad Prescott had lowered himself into the chair nearest the door without being directed to do so. His face had taken on the specific whitened quality of a person whose mind has received information it has not yet found a way to accept. Eleanor Marsh slid a single document down the length of the table. It stopped in front of Victoria without drama. "Your termination letter, Ms. Harlow. Effective immediately and for cause. Terms are on page 2. I would advise you strongly to retain criminal defense counsel before making any further statements in this room." Victoria looked at the letter. She looked at the audit folder. She looked at Daniel. The service metrics under my management were the highest in the portfolio. I built the reputation of this property from the ground up. You cannot simply— I can, Daniel said. And I am. He turned to outside counsel. Please walk through the reinstatement terms. The attorney Renata, who had been with Gibson Hotels legal for 9 years, opened a separate folder. 5 names on the first page each with hire dates and termination dates. Claudette Williams, Ruth Simmons, Margaret Cole, Diane Torres, Alice Park. Each case reviewed and flagged performance records created within 30-day windows after years of clean annual reviews, complaint logs that did not correspond to any retrievable guest records, improvement plans with benchmarks calibrated to produce failure. The analysis ran 22 pages. The conclusion required no interpretation. All 5 former employees will be contacted directly before the end of business today, Renata said. Each will be offered full reinstatement at their prior salary with a 5% cost of living adjustment, complete back pay for the full period of wrongful separation, and a formal written apology issued on company letterhead and signed by Mr. Gibson personally. Those who prefer not to return will receive severance at 1 month per year of service in addition to back pay. Victoria sat very still. You used the human resources function of this company, Daniel said, and his voice was quiet enough that the room had to settle further to hear it, to systematically remove women who had given this hotel years of their working lives because their age made their benefits cost more than younger replacements would. You manufactured performance failures. You created paper trails designed to make the outcome look earned. He paused. And then you tried to add my mother to that list. The silence that followed had a particular quality, the kind that arrives when something significant has been named precisely and cannot be walked back. Victoria looked finally at Loretta. Loretta was standing beside Daniel, hands at her sides, expression composed. There was nothing in her face that resembled triumph. There was something quieter and harder and more lasting than that, the expression of a person who has seen this moment coming and is not surprised by it, only relieved. Agent Torres spoke. Ms. Harlow, we'll need you to come with us now. You are not under arrest at this time, but we have questions regarding the transactions in this audit, and you have the right to have legal counsel present before answering any of them. Victoria stood slowly. She did not take anything from the table. She did not look at Chad. At the doorway she paused, and she turned back not toward Daniel, not toward the board, but toward Loretta. Her expression was not yet remorse. It was the beginning of something that would require considerably more time and considerably more quiet than this afternoon to become whatever it was eventually going to become. She did not say anything. She walked out. Chad Prescott's termination letter was placed in front of him by Renata 30 seconds later. Cause: immediate effect. A personnel notation that would surface in any standard reference check he faced in the hospitality industry for the foreseeable future. He left the room without speaking to anyone. Daniel looked at the papers still spread across the floor. Victoria's dropped folder, Loretta's name on 3 separate pages. Then Loretta bent down slowly and gathered every page into a neat stack. She set it on the edge of the table and straightened up. Old habit, she said simply. Daniel looked at her for a long moment. Something moved through his face that a boardroom was not really designed to contain. He put his arm around her shoulders. You ready to be done with this floor? He asked. Loretta considered it for exactly 1 moment. Not quite yet, she said. I've got 2 rooms left on 11. On Monday morning, Daniel Gibson called a mandatory all-staff meeting. All 260 employees of the Meridian Grand were required in the main lobby atrium at 9 o'clock sharp. Anyone not physically on site joined by video. No exceptions were requested, and none were offered. At 8:59, the lobby was full and very quiet. The kind of quiet that belongs to people who have spent the weekend processing something and have not yet finished. Daniel stood at the front of the room, in front of the black walnut desk in the same charcoal suit. He brought no notes. "My name is Daniel Gibson. Most of you know that name from the bottom of a paycheck. Some of you know it from a photograph on the 18th floor. Starting today, I want you to know it from this: I have been inside this building on your floors for 7 years, not as its owner, as a witness through the eyes of the person you were least likely to notice." He paused. "That person is my mother. What she experienced in the 5 days before this past Friday is something I need every one of you to see." The screen behind him came to life. The first tick-tock played at full volume. Kendall Price walking alongside Loretta's cart in the 14th floor corridor. She can barely push the cart. "How old are you, sweetheart?" Then the security footage. Henry had saved 6 camera angles. Loretta's back straight and deliberate as she pushed through the service corridor door without turning around. Then the second video. Then the first one again from the beginning. 260 people stood in the lobby of the Meridian Grand and watched in absolute silence. A woman near the back put her hand over her mouth. A man from the engineering team looked at the floor. Nobody moved. When the screen went dark, Daniel looked out across the room. "I am not here to frighten you," he said. "I am here because a company that treats the person at the bottom of its structure differently than it treats the person at the top is not a company I built this to be. And it is not a company worth the name on that desk." He announced 4 immediate changes. First, the floor and suite program. Every manager at the Meridian Grand, from department head level upward, would work 2 full days per year alongside the housekeeping team. Not observe, not evaluate. Work making beds, stocking carts, scrubbing bathrooms. Anyone unwilling to do the work would not be permitted to direct the people who did it. Second, an independent ethics reporting line bypassing HR, entirely reporting directly to the board with anonymous submission and quarterly outside review. Third, a full independent audit of every termination involving an employee over 55 across all 47 Gibson Hotels properties in the past 3 years. Where wrongdoing was confirmed, reinstatement would be offered. Where reinstatement was declined, full compensation. Where apologies were owed, they would be written personally. Fourth, the 5 women whose terminations from this property had been driven by falsified documentation were being reinstated effective today. Their names were on the screen: Claudette Williams, Ruth Simmons, Margaret Cole, Diane Torres, Alice Park. The lobby read their names in silence. In a small apartment in Hammond, Indiana, Claudette Williams, 64 years old, watched the live stream on her phone at her kitchen table, reading glasses on coffee going cold beside her. When her name appeared on the screen, she placed one hand over her mouth and sat completely still. Then she picked up her phone and called her daughter. She couldn't speak right away. Her daughter stayed on the line until she could. Henry Brooks was named Director of Security Operations for the Midwest region at the close of the meeting. He shook Daniel's hand. He made no speech. He kept his eyes forward and his expression steady, which was the only way he knew to hold what he was feeling in a room with 259 other people watching. Monique Davis was recognized by name from the podium for 7 years of loyalty, for 7 years of silence, for the quiet and unglamorous courage of keeping a promise when nothing required it, and no one would have known if she hadn't. The lobby applauded. Monique stood near the service corridor entrance in her uniform and pressed both hands briefly to her chest. The Loretta Gibson Award was announced the same week, an annual recognition given to one outstanding service staff member at each of the 47 Gibson Hotels properties. Peer-nominated, not management-selected. A hand-engraved plaque and a $10,000 check. The first recipient at the Meridian Grand was Monique Davis. Kendall Price's videos came down within 48 hours of a letter from Gibson Hotel's legal team. Her apology video, unscripted, unedited, filmed in one take in her apartment, went live the following Thursday. 2 minutes and 31 seconds. She named what she had done without softening it. It received 1.1 million views in 24 hours. 6 weeks later, she was seen by a hotel associate volunteering at a food distribution center on the South Side on a Wednesday afternoon. She was not filming. She had not announced it. Whether that meant something permanent or was only the beginning of meaning something time would determine. 6 months later, on a Tuesday morning in March, Loretta Mae Gibson pushed her cart off the freight elevator onto the 7th floor. She was still working by her own choice at her own schedule on whatever floors she selected. Daniel had stopped arguing with her about it after the 3rd attempt. A young woman named Zara, who had transferred to a full-time position after her seasonal contract ended, was moving through the 7th floor corridor when she saw Loretta shouldering a heavy linen bag. She stopped. She put her phone in her pocket. She walked over without hesitating. "Mrs. Gibson," she said, "let me take that side." Loretta looked at her. She saw in Zara's face what she had seen in Daniel's when he was very young, the look of someone who does the right thing, not because they are being observed, but because they cannot locate within themselves the version of who they are that wouldn't. She smiled. Her real smile. Wide. Warm. The one that started in her eyes. "Thank you, child," she said. They carried the bag together down the hall. That afternoon, in accounts payable, Claudette Williams sat at her reinstated desk on her first day back. Her nameplate was new. Her system access had been restored. A handwritten card from Daniel Gibson's office was propped against her monitor, 3 sentences, no letterhead, written in pen. At 3 o'clock, payroll processed. Her pay stub printed with the rest. At the bottom right corner, in clean standard type, was the name she had seen on her paychecks for 11 years, then not seen for 18 months, and was now seeing again. Daniel Gibson. She looked at it for a long time. Then she picked up her pen and went back to work. On the lobby wall beside the front entrance, 2 new frames had been installed that morning. The first a reproduction of the 1993 Black Enterprise cover Daniel Gibson 32 in front of his first hotel in Atlanta Keys in hand. The second a photograph of a woman in a gray cleaning uniform, hair wrapped in a yellow headscarf, caught mid-laugh in afternoon sunlight outside a Memphis motel sometime in the mid-1980s. Beneath it, 8 words engraved in small brass letters. Loretta Mae Gibson, 1952 to "She built this." The most honest thing a person ever reveals about themselves is not what they do. When someone powerful is watching it, is what they do when they believe no one important is. Every person pushing a cart, scrubbing a floor, or carrying something heavy in a hallway was once someone's whole world. Treat them accordingly, because sometimes this person you walk past without looking at built the floor you're standing on. If this story stayed with you, leave a comment. Tell me where you're watching from and what it made you feel. And if you're not subscribed yet, this is the kind of story we tell here every week. The ones that remind us what actually matters.